If you're getting stronger, that to me, you judge the frequency of your workout by your strength. And if you're getting stronger, you're on the right track. If you're getting stronger, that's the way you should be training, as long as you're training in a medically sound environment. Makes sense, doesn't it?
We are about to launch
Truth Not Trends! Woohoo!
Ding, 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 ding. Wait a minute. Why are we Western all of a
I
sudden?
don't know. What's going on, everybody? This is Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer
in the studio, TNT West Coast.
What's going on, people? This is the TNT Strength Podcast, where we help you maximize your strength as safely
And efficiently.
as possible. My name's Jesse Schmidt. I've been a strength coach for 1,786 wonderful days.
And my name is Liam Bauer, and I've been a strength coach for 34 years and counting.
Today, we have been blessed to speak with one of the all-time greats in the high-intensity training niche and fitness industry at large, winner of a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Resistance Exercise Conference, Roger Schwab.
Roger Schwab, he has done it all. He's been there, he's done that. He knows everyone. He's been around for 50 years, still going strong.
Well, he's been around for like 78
That's right.
years.
I was going to say, in the industry, he's about to turn 76, he says.
76.
He's still lean and mean and muscular. He's running X-Force in Pennsylvania out there, which we'll talk a little bit about. But we had so much fun rambling through the history of the Iron Game. He was a judge for the IFBB during the golden era, looking at contests back in the day with the guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, Danny Padilla, Mike Menser. He's trained them live. He's been all over the place, the West Coast, the East Coast. He's done it all.
He's done absolutely almost everything and had fun doing it. Personal friend of Arthur Jones for over 30 years. If you've ever heard of that guy, chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you have. So we really hope that you enjoy hearing from Roger. He is a wealth of wisdom. And we also want to let you know
This podcast is sponsored by
Deep Fitness.
It's Deep and it's Fit and it's Ness.
And it's available on Amazon. If you haven't heard of Deep Fitness, you got to go check this book out.
That's right.
It was written by Andrei Yakovenko and Philip Shepard.
Woo!
That's right. And they're going to teach you about mindful strength training to failure. All right. Doug McGuff signed off on this book. Dr. James Fisher signed off on this book.
Wayne Westcott.
Dr.
They're
Wayne
all in
Westcott. Some of the heavy hitters in the research of resistance training. So please go check it out on Amazon. Do yourself a favor. They're going to get you training right and braining right.
That's right. And you know, if you're looking for a good thing for your home gym, we've been working out with our new Harambe system, band-based strength system. It's awesome. It's incredible. You got to get one. You got to go out and get one. Get on the web, find Harambe system. It is the best band-based strength training system around. It is made in the USA by this incredible PhD Khaled Borbeya, aka Boo Robbie, who invented the beautiful Harambe. It's got a stainless steel bar. It's got plates. It's got parts made out of high molecular weight, super duper indestructible plastic. I don't know. I didn't invent the thing, but it is incredible. It's smooth. It's unique. You can basically replicate any barbell movement you can imagine with it. We like it.
I don't know if I have anything to add to that. It was just a great description. It's an awesome tool, people. Check out the Harambe system. They're on social media. They're everywhere.
Find them on the gram.
If you're trying to stay COVID safe still, this is a great tool to go check it out. And while you're checking things out, check out this interview with Roger Schwab.
Yeah.
We've got one of the all-time greats here.
Yeah, we're very excited to see you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Always.
You have such a incredible history. We could probably make 27 episodes.
That just shows you how old I am.
Well, it's nice for me not to be the old guy in the room for a change.
There's a lot of history there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All the way back to 1962. That's when I first got involved.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah, okay. I sat in the last row of the Brooklyn Academy of Music and saw Larry Scott win the IFBB Mr. America contest.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, he was one of my earliest influences. But Clarence Ross and Steve Reeves and
Sure.
mostly John Grimmick, because I met him and we started a friendship that lasted well close to 40 years. So that takes me back a long time for your guys who don't know who he was.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of guys who, aren't up on all the sort of history of stuff. I think everybody loves John Grimmick, not just his physique, but his physical prowess. I mean, he was strong, he was flexible, he was all those things, right? He would defeat all the terrible cliches. You're not flexible because you're muscle bound, and he was a great poser, and his physique was incredible.
John could touch his elbows to the floor with his knees straight.
Yeah, crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's genetics, and he had great ones.
Yeah, amazing.
He was. A lot of people don't think that much of Grimmick unless they saw him in person. When you saw him in person, your opinion, he didn't have that drugged look. He had that great natural mesomorph, all body parts realized potential.
Yeah, we are lucky enough to our studio is here in Oakland is actually in the same space that used to belong to Jack Dellinger, and he was I used to come over and visit him back in the 90s when he was still around and hang out, and I got a chance to spend a lot of time with him and talk shop, and he would tell me the stories about the old days. He's another one of those guys who had that classic not a lot, no drug muscularity, well proportioned. Obviously, I met him when he was much, much older, but yeah, we had a great time. He would tell me all the stories of the old days.
Yeah, well, he probably had a lot of stories to tell you. His most famous one was in 1956 when he beat Bill Pearl for the NABA Mr. Universe contest.
Yeah.
It was a major upset at the time. He was sent to NABA by Weeder, and Bill represented York, and so that was the beginning, more or less, of the York Weeder type of feud that lasted generations. But Jack Dellinger when he was good, he was really good. And he was really good in the 50s.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, that there's so many things to unpack. Again, I've been doing this stuff a little bit longer than Jesse. I came in, really into my my passion for it's probably in the 80s. And I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of those guys from that era, like Sean Ray, Gary Stridham, Mike Christian, kind of guys from that time. I did get a chance to talk to Mike Menser on the phone quite a bit in the early 90s. He was kind enough to take my phone calls and chat with me extensively. And he was living in Southern California. I was in Northern California. And unfortunately for me, he was always inviting me down to train. And I made that mistake of thinking, well, he's going to be there. So I didn't feel like a rush to get there. And then, suddenly he was gone. So I regret not getting a chance to work with him in person, but I was lucky enough to chat with him on the phone quite a bit.
We trained probably 50, 60 more times in the 70s together, from a Spartan gym in Maryland to my gym at the time, Nautilus Mainline Health and Fitness, and Gold's Gym. So every time he was in Philadelphia from his home from Ephrata, PA, he would come down to our gym and train. When I first met him in 1972-3, he was recovering from a shoulder injury. We were in Maryland at this little gym called Spartan, which was one of the first gyms at Nautilus. He had hair all over his body. He hadn't shaved, so he wasn't really in shape, but everything was there. You could see that he was going to go places if his shoulder healed, which more or less it did. He had placed 10th in the 1971 Mr. America contest, but his potential wasn't realized, in my opinion at least, until 1980. I trained him that summer for the Mr. Olympia contest, which I really thought he was going to win.
Yeah.
But I was the head judge of the IFBB at that time. And I recused myself, which was one of my many mistakes that I made in my career in bodybuilding and high intensity training. I should have gone because the judging panel that year was pretty well stacked.
Yeah, we actually were lucky enough to have Boyer Coe on as a guest not too long ago, and obviously, as you know, he was there, and he had very similar feelings. I mean, I think he ended up, a lot of people boycotted the following year, right, because they were pretty upset with how things had gone down, and of course, that next year was the Franco fiasco.
Don't even remind me. I was there. I was the head judge. So, there's a lot of history, as you said. Boyer is a personal friend. And, Boyer, I think, realized his full potential that evening in 1980 in Sydney. If you look at his pictures, he was really simply amazing. But in 1965, when I first met him, when he was a teenager, he was better before he ever touched the weight than I think I ever was after years and years of training. I was, when I first got involved, my first love was Olympic lifting. I loved the fast lifts. They didn't love me at all. And by the time I was 19, and at that time, it was the press, the snatch, and the clean and jerk, everything.
Right.
I was quick, and I could get under the snatch and the clean and jerk, and I had some pretty good totals. But they didn't have MRIs back when I was younger. But a lateral X-ray showed major degenerative change. So I learned, I shouldn't say I learned, I kept on making mistakes. I got involved in powerlifting, and that was just as bad for my joints and my spine as Olympic lifting was. But after that, my friendship for 30 years with Arthur Johnson, I trained basically injury-free when I realized the mistakes that I made. As Arthur would say, you don't learn from your successes. You do learn from your failures, and I certainly had enough of them.
Yeah, my journey in some ways reflects your own. Like many, right? You get interested, and then the only resource, there was no internet when I got started. The resources is all the magazines, and you believe everything you see when you're just starting out, and everything you read. And I got into all the different things, and I used to carry around a bag filled with wraps and straps because I was always hurt somewhere, And I also thought, well, I just have to work through it, right? I'd wrap my shoulder, wrap my elbow, wrap my wrist. I didn't think I should take time off, or I just had to keep going 6 days a week, and it was only when I recognized the validity of the high intensity stuff. I don't think I've ever been injured ever since. Once I recognized the mistakes I was making, but in the beginning, I was always hurt, and I always thought I had to just keep going anyway. Yeah, unfortunately. I also got into the Olympic lifting. Do you know Jim Schmitz, the Olympic coach? He was the U.S. Olympic coach several times, and we had him on as well. He's an old friend of mine. Another guy who's a real historian of the iron game and loves all that stuff. I thought you guys might have crossed paths at some point.
No, I think I know the name. The historians of the sport that I know is certainly Steve Wennerstrom, Bill Hinburn, Joe Rourke. These are really good guys, and they really were passionate about the industry. I think my only regret in this whole industry was, the debate with Nautilus and free weights when Arthur came on the scene. That never really had to happen. And that was really to sell magazines and to pit Weider against, because, it was all come down to money, economics of the whole thing. They both work, and they're both great tools. It's not the tool so much as the misuse of the tool. And I misused the barbell. My injuries weren't because of the barbell. My injuries were my misuse of the barbell. So those debates never really had to happen. And the most important thing is staying safe. As you said, you can't, what's the point of getting stronger if you're hurt, if your joints are hurt? The main thing is to prevent injury, to train as hard as you can and it's not the intensity that causes injuries, as you know. Every rep is a warm-up for the hard reps at the end of the set. Those hard reps is the same weight as it was at the beginning of the set. That's not why people get hurt. People get hurt from impact forces and from, the quickness, the jerking of the weights. If you lift the weights and lower the weights reasonably, we don't count 414 or 315 or whatever. We're in control of the weight. And if we're in any doubt, we move slower. That should be common sense in a field where common sense is not often common.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that too, because you hear that of course, we've all heard that argument, and maybe it'll never go away, the machines versus free weights. But more recently, what I often do is, my counter to it is when they say, oh, free weights are better, or athletes only use, I'm like, show me someone who doesn't use machines, right? But like, the reality is they all, like you were saying in some other interviews we heard, Arnold used the machine. They used whatever tool was available, right? Whether they use it well or not is another story. But it's not like they walked around and Nautilus showed up and so they said, well, we're not using that. right? We're only going to use barbells because they're better. People embraced every tool available, right? Especially in bodybuilding where they really feel like all the different angles and everything's important, right? So I don't know there's anyone who doesn't use machines, but for some reason the argument somehow always ends up machines are not functional or they blah, 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 right? You've heard it all a million times.
I think that started, remember back, Nauglus's first 3 pieces of equipment were the pullover and the bicep and tricep combination, right? You remember those?
Sure.
Well, in 1981, when I was judging IFBB events, there was one specific event in Atlantic City that before the contest, the competitors and I trained at this gym that was inside the complex where the event was to be held. And so these guys would get on the plate loading biceps. And, obviously your axis of rotation of the body part had to be in the axis of rotation of the single joint machine. So they weren't feeling anything because their elbow was, 6 inches in front of where the axis was. But when I got them in the machine and they did it right, invariably they would say, wow, that really feels good. I think if Nautilus let us down in any way, it was not teaching this equipment the way it should be taught. And if you teach it correctly, just as you teach a barbell correctly, you will stimulate a response if the intensity is enough to allow the response, right? I was there and I saw it. These things never had to happen, but invariably they did because, people just didn't use the tools right.
Might be almost like a manual versus an automatic, everybody, like barbells were around, so people knew how to use them. You could just walk up to it and people already knew the technique, but you might not know how to set up that, that Nautilus curl correctly. Got to learn how to do it. Got to read the manual.
Unless you're doing very, very high reps, that's a lot of force on the spine. Joint stress accumulates silently. And all of a sudden, 10 years later, a runner who hasn't run in 10 years and their knee starts to hurt them, gee, I haven't run in 10 years. But it's the accumulation of that joint stress probably stimulated that injury. So you see, I'm not even talking about the guys who have passed away from the abuse in other ways, but the orthopedic injuries, when these weightlifters got older, you would see major degenerative change in probably 100% of the cases. Everybody wound up getting hurt in their old age from the sins of their past. I don't think it ever had to happen if, they moved the weight slower, used less resistance, and kept their repetitions a little bit higher. I don't mean high by 30 or 40 reps, but, higher than 1 to 5. Who in the world would do a max lift, a one-time rep, one-time max rep in a craziness? And then you see football players today, pro football players, these guys are making a ton of money and they go into the weight room and you see a quarterback with 400 or 500 pounds on his neck squatting and the players around him cheering. You say, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. I mean, you have to admire guys like Dan Riley, who, spent all that time in the NFL using basically 100% machines and championed that and clearly had tremendous success. He was with the Redskins for over 20 years. They won the Super Bowl multiple times when he was there. Their injury rates super low, if any. And that sort of followed him through his entire career. And, he showed the success. I always tell people with that stuff, like, you watch a game on Sunday and you tell me which player uses barbells and which uses machines when you see them play the game of football. You can't tell. These guys are elite athletes at their best. It has nothing to do with it. They're not training somehow or playing the game less effectively because they did a leg press instead of a squat. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And again, like you're saying, the longevity, the safety, the injury prevention is so much better on that side than on the barbell side. It doesn't make any sense. To me, athletes more than any population should be doing high intensity training, right? It's efficient. It's safer. We want them to have long careers, injury free. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to possibly have them hurt. Yeah, like that seems like a sin beyond compare.
Mike Mentzer in 1979, when he went out to California, he was out there. Casey Theodore went with Arthur Jones out to train with Mike and Ray at Gold's Gym in 79. And the way that Casey and Mike told me is they went out, everybody would form around the 3 of them. And they got so involved in looking as strong, and they were strong, that they were doing partials. They were doing partial squats. They were doing, overhead presses, both, above the head, mid-range, down here, different weights, everything partial reps and crazy. Mike re-aggravated his shoulder injury like that. I don't know if Casey and Ray got hurt, but Mike got hurt right away. It wasn't worth the trip. You understand? It wasn't worth the people around you spurring you on if you were going to get hurt. They never got, when I trained Mike, it was always Nautilus and it was always pre-exhaust. And I never suggested the workout. When he trained at my gym, and the whole gym was around watching him and I train, which was somewhat embarrassing, I must say, on my part. But when we trained together, it was always pre-exhaust. It was almost always the same workout. It was never a split routine. I mean, he did those routines, I guess, in California, but never at Spartan Gym, at Mainline Health and Fitness, at Gold's Gym. We never did a split routine. It was always the same protocol. Was it the best protocol? Well, I can tell you it was the safest protocol. And he never got hurt. He never aggravated his shoulder. Same when I trained Casey. Same with Ray Menser. Never got hurt.
Ray Menser is someone we don't hear as much about because Mike was so beloved and outspoken at different times in his career. Embraced by the hit community to a great extent, at least by some.
And wrote books.
Yeah, but Ray, as I've heard you say, and I've heard from others, was stronger and so impressive. Incredible. But we don't hear much about him. So what do you have to say about working with Ray as far as his physique, his abilities?
He was the second strongest man who I ever trained. Casey was the strongest, at least on the extra. They were both stronger than Mike, but that doesn't take anything away from Mike. Mike was really strong. Ray always had trouble maintaining the body weight that he needed as far as physique competition. But in 1979, he zeroed in. He won the AAU Mr. America in 1979. And boy, he was good. He was heavy and ripped. He could never hold that after 1979. When he passed away, he probably weighed 50, 100 pounds more than he did that night. He was great. He always trained hard. Every time I saw him, he trained hard. He was a fiery type of a guy. He could lose his. He wasn't happy with me when judging him in contests. But as I've said in print, I always stayed around after the contests and answered questions, and it wasn't easy. I was 175, 180 pounds at my highest, and these guys were bigger and stronger than me. And to sit there afterwards when a Greg DeFaro comes up to you at a 225, looks you in the eye and say, "You're ripping me off here." It's really difficult to answer these questions. But if you're going to do it, you either do it right or you don't at all. And I felt like I was an objective judge. And I guess my peers felt that way too, because I became head judge and there was no votes against it. And I enjoyed my time and I feel good about my time doing those things, doing that job. I was the only person in the IFBB, I think, who had a close affiliation with Arthur Jones. But Weider never got in my way. He tried to edit my articles, so I didn't write for him. But Perry Rader never edited any of my articles. And so when I covered the contests, the competitors would write to me and say, I respect you, Roger, and I respect, that you judge this contest fairly. In retrospect, I can see why I didn't place as high. Only one person wins the contest,
Yeah.
But I feel no regrets.
When did you retire from doing the judging stuff for the IFBB?
I retired in 1982, but I went on later to judge some Ironman contest for John Balick, who was a close personal friend of mine, and he asked, and I did in the early 90s. But I judged from 1975 to 82. I judged contests, and usually with Bill Pearl, Reg Park when he was in the country. Some of these great guys, oh my God, some of these judging panels were really good, and some were really bad. And when they weren't so great, I put my words into writing to Ben Weider and told him this is not going to work. I didn't hold very much clout.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot going on behind the scenes in that world that most people have no idea, how controlled things are, outcomes and so forth, despite the best intentions of yourself or people like yourself. Mike had a lot of words to say about that, obviously, but
those contests were not fixed though, and not the ones that I was involved in. 1980. I don't think it was fixed. I just think that if you have a judging panel that is partial, that does business with competitors and things like that, you're going to have outcomes like this. 1981 was the worst. I mean, I wasn't there in 80, but I was right up on stage in 81 when they were ready to tear the house down, justifiably so. But that judging panel, I wrote a letter to Ben Weider and I spoke up before the contest. It is what it is. I did the best that I could, and
Yeah, in some ways I miss those days because I used to write letters to these guys, and it was amazing because they would write you very thoughtful and detailed responses. Long before the internet, I can remember reading an article, being intrigued, writing a letter to the author. They would take time to draw little pictures and send me these letters back. This one or that. It was like incredible. I kind of miss those days. Even with the ease of electronic response, it seems like you don't necessarily get those kind of responses from people anymore.
I think right up to Dorian Yates, who's a high. If you ever saw him train, I mean, it was like unbelievable. But I kind of dropped out as far as my interest in the mid '90s. And strangely enough, I think the reason I stopped was it was one body part that just disturbed me. And it was shoulders. These shoulders that these guys started to show at contests. If you remember Don Howarth and Larry Scott in the 60s, and these guys had really muscular shoulders, and you could see all the striations. In the 90s, I don't know what was in those shoulders, this oil that synthol put in, but it didn't look like shoulders anymore. It looked like big, round melons. And I'm saying, what kind of lateral raises are these guys doing? And overhead presses that were different than what we did.
Right.
I wasn't naive, but I lost interest. And before that, Momo Benaziza and Andreas Munzer were friends of mine, and they were dead.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to be part of things like that? And in the last year or two, I mean, they're like guys who I knew were friends are dying. And,
all over. It's frightening.
And they should know better. I don't know. The sport is not bodybuilding anymore. It's not healthy. It's not good. And I don't know what's going to turn it around, quite frankly. I just don't know. Professional contests certainly aren't. And now anybody with the IFBB, you're an IFBB pro. And there's so many divisions, and this and that, and this and that. I guess some people love it and find beauty in it. It's anathema to me.
Yeah, yeah. So now we can, I mean, again, I wish I could talk to you all day about it, but are you doing the X-Force stuff right now? That's sort of, are you actively doing X-Force at this moment? Obviously not right now while we're talking, but.
In 2008, Mats Tulin from Sweden showed X-Force in San Francisco at the URSA convention. And he showed it again in 2009.
Yeah, I was actually at that show in 2009. I was hanging out with Jim Flanagan and Darden, but I don't remember meeting you. Tom Grace was there, but I guess you must have been there.
Yeah, I was there.
David Landau, you know that guy?
Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah.
There. I was with John Balick in San Diego in 2009. He took a lot of pictures, and I was hooked. I thought the feel was tremendous. I thought these machines were going to, I thought everybody was going to buy this equipment. But at $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 a pop, again, I was wrong. But I knew I was going to do it. And so I went to Sweden, and I worked with their engineer, a guy named David Berglund, who's a very brilliant guy, and their orthopedic surgeon, Bjorn Alber, who's another brilliant guy. And we worked on those strength curves of those machines. And I thought when I brought them to the United States in January of 2012, that it was the best thing, the best workouts I ever had in my life. And at that time, I was almost 70 years old. So now at 76 in 2022, I train on them once a week. I train as hard as I ever did. And I'm in hard muscular shape. I understand the physiology. To me, it's just another step. It's a technological breakthrough that does not do anything to take away from Nautilus or Med-X, which are great tools, or Hammer Strength. It's just a step above. It gives you a 40% heavier negative. Is it perfect? No, but it's a smooth transition. So it makes, if anything, it makes your form better, because after that positive and you're holding the contraction and the weight stack straightens and it's giving you 40%, It's not jolting you. It's giving you a smooth transition, and you're working on the negative. So for that alone, you're focused more on the positive and the negative. Medics equipment and Nautilus equipment, I love. We have several pieces of both of them in X-Force because we also have Iron Core, Tyler Hobson's equipment.
Sure, yeah.
Awfully bright guy. So, we're particular, but we recognize good equipment wherever it comes from.
Yeah.
Now, if you're asking me specifically about X-Force, it is the finest equipment I've ever personally trained on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now, so you're still working out once a week, and for your clientele, do you recommend like once or twice a week? Do you have like a sort of an optimum strategy that you feel is best for the the general masses? Not a competitive bodybuilder.
Yeah, which the same philosophy applies to any strength training tool. In my opinion, if you're getting stronger in good form, you're on the right track. Meaning that if I train you on Monday and you train hard, and I train you on Thursday again and you train hard, and you said, I love this workout, but on Thursday you were not maintaining the reps you made on Monday, I might psychologically be helping you, but physiologically I'm not at all because you haven't recovered from the stimulus. So in my opinion, if you recover from the stimulus, you're on the right track. Some people recover quicker. Some people 3 days, 4 days. With me, I'm best about at my age, which will be 77. I recover quicker. I don't recover quicker than 7 days, I'd say. And I could wait longer. What happens when I wait 10, 11 days? My strength is still good. It's my conditioning, the specific conditioning of strength training that suffers. My breathing, especially on leg work, right? But if you're getting stronger, that to me, you judge the frequency of your workout by your strength. And if you're getting stronger, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in strength training. If you're getting stronger, that's the way you should be training, as long as you're training in a medically sound environment. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I think that is a very common thing for people to experience when they're training very infrequently, to have that sort of there's a mental conditioning too, right? So when you are getting more of that stimulus, you're more used to it, right? If you're used to training 2+ times per week, it's a regular thing. It's familiar. When you drop that frequency down, unless you're very, very experienced and you just know, right, like that it's going to be incredibly challenging, and it's going to be more challenging than the last time, and all of that stuff. I find that because sometimes we train people in generally the same style you do, once or twice per week. Sometimes people will start training twice per week, and then they'll shift for whatever reason to once per week, whether it's just their schedule changes or something like that. And then when they kind of downshift to the once per week, it's mentally just seems a little bit more challenging. And I think it's just they're not used to it anymore, or as used to it as they were when they were getting more of that stimulus.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in that, because one thing we often tell people when they're wondering about the recovery part is, I always say the numbers don't lie, right? So if you're tracking things, if the numbers are going down, right, you probably need more rest. That's the thing people don't understand, right? The general population who has no understanding of what's really happening, they often think, well, if this workout's not working, I need more, right? I need more stimulus. They don't understand, like, actually, if you do less, you'll probably get better results. I've run into these guys, they got to bench press 3 times a week and they're stuck, and they've just hit this roadblock. And I would tell them, if you take 10 days off right now, I guarantee you're going to set a PR when you come back, and they just couldn't accept it. They were like, I got to bench every other day, like I can't miss it.
Nautilus, the medics, we should all be together. We're not far off.
For sure.
And it's egos, or it's dollars and cents. But you know what? I am old enough. I am so far past that. I'm all for everybody. And the young Turks in this business, like you, Jesse, Mike Petrella, like these Brian and Peter Collins in England.
Yeah, those guys are great.
Luke Carlson. These guys are trying to bring it all together. And this is the way it should be. It shouldn't be, he doesn't know and he doesn't understand passive insufficiency or active insufficiency. What does he know? And if you don't move 10, 10, 10, 10, you're
It's so funny what you're saying, Roger, because we're starting to grow our following, and our network is constantly expanding because of the podcast that we do. We interview people internationally and all this stuff, and I kind of, before we were kind of at magnitude that we're at, I was kind of expecting that, not everybody's going to agree with the sort of stuff that we talk about, training intensely, training slowly, training safely, training on machines, whatever you want to say about the way that we train. And so I was expecting that it would be people outside the HIIT community that would have the most pushback. It has not been that case. People outside the HIIT community, by and large, are curious and ask good questions and like engage in dialogue. It has been people inside the high intensity training community that like to argue semantics and split hairs and really just get kind of vicious, especially on social media, which is just funny. We try to just let it roll off our backs, just like you're saying.
You don't know how right you are. We're all together. We're all brothers or sisters in iron, and we don't train the same way as you, but we're really interested in your career and what we never argue. We've never had a word, and high intensity training to them is they don't even discuss it, but they respect honesty, I think, and they respect integrity. And wherever you're coming from, if you're trying to, you're just trying to say the way you see it. Again, somebody like, if you took a look at Mike Menser when he was 15 years old, before he ever even started, oh my God, he was better than most anybody else is going to be when they trained their whole life. This is the way it goes. So if Mike he didn't train this way, but if he had done 5 sets of 6, like Reg Park did 5 sets of 6 of 20, 30 different exercises, who are you to argue with Reg Park that he made tremendous progress? Could he have made it better with less work? Probably, but maybe. But so what? We're not all going to train the same. You just do it the way you see it. You don't knock anybody else unless they're doing craziness, which you see today. I mean, this platoon stuff and plyometric stuff and bouncing weight on the physio ball. I mean, seriously, you've got to be a lunatic to be, in my opinion, to be doing like this. But this is the way they do it.
Yeah, a lot of times these days we often refer to ourselves as HIIT influenced, right? Versus like pure high intensity, because we have our own take on it. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. There's all these branches off the tree, right? I kind of see like Arthur Jones is like this meteor that hit and then the ripples went out, right? And there's all the branches or waves, but they all can trace their lineage directly back to his influence. And we should appreciate the similarities versus having squabbles over these tiny little minutia of cadences or whatever protocols. Like you said, passive insufficiency. They get a little too technical for their own good.
You remember what you just said, because everything does from Arthur Jones. Almost all of Mike Mike had the big muscles, and so when Mike was writing for Muscle and Fitness or Muscle Builder or whatever at the time, if you looked at his words, I mean, I love Mike like a brother, but his words were Arthur Jones, exactly Arthur Jones. But Arthur wasn't in those. Weider would never put him in a Muscle Builder. So he was an Ironman, and Ironman didn't have nearly circulation that Weider's magazine. So people didn't really know Arthur Jones. He invented all those machines, but where were his muscles? Well, his muscles spoke from Mike Menser. And gee, Mike, this is amazing, the things that you're saying. But the words that Mike was saying was Arthur Jones. It was all Arthur Jones. Arthur was so far ahead, and he hit the field like a bombshell. Oh my God, he made mistakes along the way, and some of his recommendations changed over the years slightly. But he was always thinking, and he was always way ahead of the curve. And he should be saluted by everybody. He really understood it. He really got it.
Yeah.
This is just a bit of a tangent, Roger, but I don't know, were you at the REC in 2021 in Vegas?
Was that the one that I won the Lifetime Achievement Award?
Oh yeah. I think it might have been. That's right.
No, that was 2 years ago. Last year I didn't go, but this year I planned a thing that Lou Carlson is a very positive thing. He's really trying hard to spread the gospel in a very non-threatening way. We don't all agree out there, but they all respect each other enough to listen to the different opinions, and they're not all that different.
Yeah, right. I agree. Absolutely.
So we got to see a demonstration, and actually I used the bicep curl from this new company. I can't remember their name, but they're is it Imagine? Is that the company?
I'm not sure.
They're basically retrofitting MedX equipment with software that basically gives it a function almost like X-Force, right? Where it's increasing the negative weight, which is really interesting. It's very smooth, just like MedX. When we were testing it at REC, they were still working out the kinks, but pretty cool. And we also got to sit in on a presentation put on by the guy, and I don't remember his name, but he gave us a presentation on Titan, which we had Dr. James Fisher on our podcast, and we've asked a couple of our guests since then about this Titan substrate and why it's so important. And I just think it's a fascinating thing. I don't know if you've looked into this at all yourself, but we're doing as much asking around as we can to learn more about it. Apparently, it's not a very well understood substrate, but why is negative training so important? We saw with in the Colorado experiment with Casey Viator, they did a ton of negative training, and people have so much success with it. I think it's a really fascinating. It's going to be really interesting to see where the world goes from here. What with X-Force being out there, Imagine this new company.
Yeah, there was the plate-loaded company. Was it Negative Attitude? I think they made those machines. I think Mike Petrella up there, and I think he probably has some in his collection because he has a little bit of everything.
He has everything else under the sun.
Yeah,
good. Look into it because it's only a benefit. If X-Force does anything, raises the intensity of your repetitions in a safe way. I'm all for anything that does that.
Do you remember that equipment in the late 80s, early 90s, that Life circuit that did the same thing with electric motors? It would add a 40% to the negative.
That was a way, way different feel, I assure you.
Oh, sure.
First of all, you could hear that motor, and boy, you got to the contracted position, and you felt it. It was a jolt, but it was certainly the forerunner. Could have been really exciting, but c'est la vie, it didn't catch on.
I think a lot of times these companies, unfortunately, even if they have a good idea, they'll just think it's time to move on, rather than dig deeper and flesh it out and improve it. They'll just go in a whole nother direction. Cybex also in the 90s did that stuff called VR2. You may have that provided resistance in more than one plane at a time. To me, that was some of the most interesting equipment that Cybex ever developed, but then they just sort of left it behind and, went off in these other directions.
The reason they left it behind, if you ever tried it, it moved in more than one plane, but you could, unless you had the balance of it, it was awkward at first. People weren't willing to give it a second chance.
Yeah.
But they were thinking, I think the problem stems still all these many years later with the acceptance of strength training. We're in a very small community. This is maybe not overly relevant, but it happened to me recently at X-Force. We were training a young woman who happened to be a spinning teacher at a different studio. But she came in and she liked the way X-Force made her feel, and she liked the feel of the machines. She said, "This is a really hard workout," she said. And then she said something that really hit home to me, like it pierced an arrow right through my heart. She said, "What makes you think that people come into a gym looking for results?" She says, "To me, people are looking for a community." I couldn't believe she said something like that to me. And it really was upsetting. I thought I heard it all. But if you take a look at spinning classes, where you're sitting on a bike for 45 minutes or an hour, you're rotating around your hips and your knees, you're eventually wearing down that hip girdle and you're in the cartilage in your knee without stimulating any type of strength. But there's 20 or 30 of you sitting there and sweating next to each other. And there's a sense of hoo-yah. Wow, we're doing this all together. But what are they looking for? Are they looking for results from training? Yeah, you'll improve your heart-lung efficiency, but in my opinion, no more than you will in a high-intensity workout where you're working every single major muscular structure through a full range of motion. There's no comparison of the two. One, you're getting everything functionally, and one, you're getting some cardiovascular benefits, which, even though it's horizontal movement and safer than a linear movement of running, it's still not conducive to overall joint health. And they're doing that as a group, and they're feeling great about it. That's community. I never walked into a gym for community ever. Even when I trained on the West Coast at Gold's with those guys, which was really fun. You're always training as hard as you can to realize a stimulus that's going to, result in muscular strength, size, whatever. But now you ask a woman today, out of every woman who strength trains, 10 do spinning or yoga or Pilates or all three. And to give it one day a week just to strength train for 30 or 40 minutes, to me, would change their whole empowerment of the strength of a woman.
No doubt.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I think that's one of the things, because a lot of us in this community, we sometimes like to make fun of, CrossFit, for instance, or, but I think CrossFit, that's one of the reasons why people are so attracted. They excel at building community, right? Like they create zealotous fans, whether you like them or not, or whether you believe that what they're doing is safe or the most productive. They're really good at it, right? They build this amazing group of people that feel like they want to be part of it. And I don't feel like that happens in our niche.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned some names here, Roger, like Brian Collins over in the UK. Their social media is great. It's hilarious. Like, I'm sure you've seen these videos. They put videos and pictures of their clients as they're reaching failure, and they've got the sour lemon face, and it's just great. And they've got this camaraderie with their clients, and you can tell they're just like building really solid relationships there. To use something that another guy you mentioned, Luke Carlson, likes to talk about. I think the HIIT community needs to, if I can use my platform to talk about this for a second, the HIIT community needs to be focused on the genius of the and when it comes to this stuff. We need to give people hard, productive workouts, and we need to be building community. And they don't necessarily happen at the same time. So you can use your social media platforms to do it and stay connected. We do that. We follow our clients back and we comment on their stuff. We got, a couple of our clients where we got the Oakland Marathon right around the corner. We're going to be sending some text messages saying, hey, go get them, and all that stuff. But this is, and maybe you have like a client appreciation night or something like that, or social events. I'm trying to put together a Spartan race to go run with some of our clients. But I do think it has to be a little, in this day and age, it has to be a little bit more than just coming and going for your workouts, right? There have to be other opportunities for us to connect outside of that time. If you are in the HIIT sort of setting, right? Because generally we're doing, 20, 30-minute workouts. We're not doing the 2-hour marathons where we all stand around the water fountain or the TV in the gym and we watch the game, right? So, there is that kind of primal need to be with, like-minded people. And really, if we can build that community with our clients in our businesses, is a huge benefit to everyone.
I respect eager young minds like you.
Hey, what are those guys doing here? Whenever I feel like I'm stalling out on my bench press, I know I need a new strength curve. Whether you're stalling out on the road or stalling out in the gym, you need something with great engineering. That's right. So look for the pendulum. Pendulum. Not just your average strength machines. No, they have smooth strength curves, amazing rigidity. And did we mention the engineering's fantastic? That's right. Not to mention, they come in cool colors. Like red and silver. Well, that was kind of weird. What was that all about? Back to the interview.
In listening to preparing for this interview, that you had a lot to do with women's bodybuilding and supporting the growth of that side of things and women in the gym. And it popped in my head yesterday. I was wondering if you ever crossed paths with Bev Francis back in the day, because she was one of the earlier pioneers of being a very powerful, muscular woman. Early in the days back, you had sort of their names are even escaping me. Who was the woman before Corey Everson? Yeah, Rachel McLeish. Yeah. So
even before these people, in 1977, when women's bodybuilding first took hold, we started at Mainline Nautilus a group called the Physiques, and we went around to Night of the Champion contests, and 20 of our women posed on stage as a group. So we were the forerunners of group women's bodybuilding, I would say. Stacy Bentley, who went on to become a pro, was part of that group. We went out to California, at least I did, and spoke to Lisa Lyons, who was really the forerunner of women's bodybuilding in this contest. And then there was Rachel, and then there was Bev Francis, as you mentioned, Carla Dunlap, some really muscular, strong women. But just like Dorian Yates changed male bodybuilding, Bev Francis changed in an instant female bodybuilding. And all of a sudden, it was not the aesthetic grace of a Rachel McLish. It was the head-on muscle of Bev Francis, and not everybody took to it.
Sure.
And but as a person, as a woman, she's a strong, great woman, nice as can be. Australian just happened to have a high testosterone level and realized her potential. Apples and oranges, it depends.
Yeah. I mean, she sticks out in my mind just as one of the pioneers of being very muscular and very strong, right? As opposed to Rachel McLish. Again, nothing wrong with them, just a very different physiques and a different approach, right? But female bodybuilding obviously embraced more and more exogenous substances and went in its own direction, and they became. I mean, some of them now even are. I mean, I'm sure they're doing 10 times the amount of stuff that Arnold and those guys did in their day, because the physiques are out of control.
In the mid-1980s, Ray and Mike Menser went to work for a physician in Maryland by the name of John Ziegler. John Ziegler previously was the strength coach of the United States weightlifting. And he, along with Seba Pharmacy, introduced Dianabol.
Yep.
And I put it into print, and I say it again, it was the introduction of 5 milligrams of Dianabol that once that hit the market, the chemistry would never look back. And it was always going to be forward, and it was always going to be, if some is good, as you mentioned earlier, more is going to be certainly better in a very non-healthy way. But that gave way to the injectables, and the injectables gave way to the oils. And now it's, my God, between the Lasix and the growth hormone, I mean, where do you stop? I mean, and then do you stay alive? Then is it worth it? As judging bodybuilding contests with Paul Dillett, and I put this in print also, and Albert Beckles came out different years, but in prejudging, they went into a pose and couldn't get out of it. It was almost like they froze up on stage. It's like their electrolytes shut down.
I distinctly remember that with Paul Dillett. Absolutely. They had to carry him off the stage like a statue. I remember he was literally frozen and his body just locked up. Imagine like an entire body cramp.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And they literally had to tilt him over and like carry him away.
You think that something like that would have put it, if it didn't put it to an end, at least put it to a halt.
Yeah.
At least temporarily. But all guns were blazing. It was forward marching.
Yeah, you mentioned, unfortunately, and I'm sorry for that. You mentioned both Andreas Munzer and Mohammed Benaziz. And that's those guys getting carried away with the water. Not drinking enough water and trying to be so that ultra thin skin, right? And then the diuretics and oh my God, there's so many ways that they can put themselves in danger in this attempt to reach some visual thing. Yeah, it's sad and unfortunate. We just had another guy, young guy. I mean, they're dropping like flies, actually, a lot of the current crop. Boston Lloyd. I don't know if you know that name, but yeah, I mean, he was like 29.
Thorne Roden, just Matt Mendenhall. I mean, Mendenhall was at the top of his grade in the 80s. I mean, he was easily could have been a great pro. Just contest day on a couple of contests, he didn't quite get where he wanted to be, but tremendous physiques, and they're dead. I mean, really. I mean, Rocky DeFerro, he died very, very young. Paul DeMeo, he died very young.
Yeah.
When you judge him and you know him up close and you're talking to him one day and the next day, not from natural causes, but they pass away. Life's too short as it is.
Jackie Paisley.
Yeah, great girls. I mean, really. But, you go on and all you can do is talk about it. And all you can do is not criticize. You just say, maybe you change the judging or you do something to stand in the way, at least make an attempt.
Education too. I guess, people don't necessarily understand what's involved, right? Because it's still even today, it's sort of, kept in the closet, right, if you will, or under the rug. What it really takes to be at that level, it's not, bodybuilding as a pastime is the healthiest thing you can do, but competitive bodybuilding is probably the antithesis in its current state.
I agree. I totally agree. It's nothing that I want to be involved in, but I was there in the golden era, and I wouldn't trade those days for anything. It was just wonderful. Lying in California sand and watching Franco and Arnold and having breakfast at the firehouse and training at Gold's Gym and hanging out with John Balick and the crew. They were great, great guys. It was really fun times. And there was a camaraderie. It wasn't the nastiness. And, doesn't matter. It was there. It was good.
I heard you mention in another interview that you also worked with Danny Padilla as another one with an amazing physique.
Well, Danny Padilla, I'll remember from training at my gym and also from 1981 when he realized his potential. And in this opinion, should have been Mr. Olympia on that September night, 1981, when he probably weighed all of 155, 160 pounds. But he didn't have a drop of fat on him, and he was the most proportionate physique that night. Although, in my opinion, Roy Callender could also have won. He doesn't get the accolades that he should, but that night Roy Callender was always great, but that night he was outstanding. And then, of course, everybody talks about Tom Platz, and he was at his best that night too. Unfortunately, a little while later, he tore his right bicep tendon. I think doing a set of flies at Gold's Gym, and that bicep rolled up his arm, and that was the end of his competitive career, even though Dorian did the same thing to his left bicep and he kept on winning. But I don't think that Platz had the proportion that Dorian did, and that was the end of his his real competitive career. But that night in 81, Danny and Roy Callender, if either one had won, I don't think there would have been any outcry, especially the Franco one, which it's a shame because Franco was such a tremendous bodybuilder, especially in the mid-70s, but he wasn't the best that night in 1981, and everybody knew it, including him. But he won, and then unfortunately he died too.
Yeah. Tell me a little more about Danny Padilla, working with him in his, people that probably don't know him, obviously he's another one of these guys who, unless you're really into the bodybuilding thing, people probably have no idea who he is. But his physique is probably one of the most, he's a very short guy, like a gymnast size, really, but so incredibly developed. It's amazing. You see pictures of him. It's just, incredible.
Again, Danny was 5'3" about. His bicep inserted right at the elbow. His tricep was low. His vastus lateralis inserted at the same place as vastus medialis did. So his calves were down to his ankle. He had it all. He had it all, and he was always great, even when he was competing heavier than he needed to be. In 1981, he shed all the extra body weight, and all he was tremendously proportioned for a short physique with these long muscle bellies hanging out all over. And it was incredible. If you have a chance, or your listeners, Google him from 1981, and you'll see what a picture of a bodybuilder who's only 100, as I said, 155, 160, who had no fat and perfect proportions. He should have won, and he knew it too. And he was upset afterwards, and justifiably so. He was mad at me also, even though I was a non-voting judge. I had him up on at that night or that day at prejudging. So prejudging was completely packed. Everybody was there, and I was on stage with all the competitors doing their mandatory poses. So I talked individually to each of them up there. And I remember saying to Danny, I said, you're best today. I've never seen you look like this. I want you to stand up there and pose with everything you got, because you have a real shot to win today. And he got so pumped up that he couldn't even hold his poses. He was so pumped up. And he felt great. And he thanked me until after the contest. And he walked up to me and he wagged his finger at me. He says, just like all the rest of them. What can you say? He placed fifth. He should have placed first. He should have been upset.
Yeah.
But nobody can take away his conditioning from that night. You can take away the title, but you can't take away the way he looked in posterity. History will show how good he looked at.
I think, a lot of these, that's another thing that happens in this world, right? This is, not important, but to me, funny, like everything's always exaggerated, right? How much they weigh, what their measurements are. You'll see somebody like Danny Padilla, who you just said, was on stage at 155 pounds and looking incredible. We just Googled it while we were chatting. But, there's no way that a guy that's, 5'3" and weighs 150 pounds has like a 20-inch arm, or whatever. But you'll hear these measurements thrown around constantly. It's all fake, right? 99% of the time. And it's funny that they feel the need to like exaggerate it when they look incredible. Even Zayn, right? He wasn't a big guy, but you can't take away from the incredible physique that he was able to produce.
Well, people, because he was 180, 190 pounds, they talk about him as being small. But I will tell you, Frank Zane was a mess of one. This guy had long muscle bellies and full muscle bellies. If you take a look at the pictures, especially of his quads, way heavier than you think that they might have been. He just knew how to dial it in. In 1976, in January of 76, I hope you don't mind these stories, but they're so much fun to remember. John Balick and I went up with Arnold and Ed Corney and Frank Zane up to New York to the Whitney Museum of Art, where the elite community of New York was showing bodybuilding as art. Corney was in half decent shape, but Arnold was terribly out of shape. Nothing compared to how out of shape Frank Zane was. But these people who loved the art crowd in New York didn't know from being ripped up. They just knew three big guys were posing at the Whitney Museum of Art in front of these, art intellectual people. And jaws dropped. They weren't in shape, but jaws dropped. I looked at Frank Zane and said, this was 1976. He not only is not going to enter the Mr. Olympia contest, he couldn't win Mr. Philadelphia right now. 8 months later in Ohio, he placed second to Colombo. He had my vote. He should have won the contest. How a guy could change the physique from January to October of that year, to me, was one of the most amazing transformations I've ever seen. If you could ever Google that night at the Whitney Museum and the way Zane looked late in that fall after that winter, the transformation's almost unbelievable. They call him the chemist, and justifiably so. He knew how to do it, I'll tell you that. And he did it. These guys get into shape, but nothing like that transformation. Oh my God.
I mean, I know he ended up winning it, 3 times in a row, right? The Olympia.
77, 78, 79. And each year he seemingly improved.
Since we're talking about all these great old guys, what about Clarence Bass? Is that someone you spent any time with in your days?
I mean, we were friends. He certainly realistically brought it all into perspective of what condition a guy could get into who was natural and who really watched the amount of calories he put into his body. And he did everything by the book. He was in Texas. He went to a medical facility and had his everything tested, his lipid panel tested, certainly his body fat by a DEXA scan, I would imagine. And this guy comes in at 2 or 3% body fat, not by doing any exotic routines. At that time, he was doing mostly high intensity training.
Yeah.
But he was watching the amount of food he put into his body. We talked today about the super diets and the high protein diets, or the paleo diet. It was basically, to an extent, calories in, calories out. If you were going to take in less calories, you're going to oxidize fats. And if you're going to take in more, then you're going to add body fat. It wasn't that complex, but selling supplements is a big deal, and there's a lot of money in it.
He was even pretty much a vegetarian at that point, or at least a partial vegetarian, at times when he got super shredded.
Natural peanut butter guy, and he liked third peanut butter on multigrain bread. Same with Mike Menser when he stayed at my house. They couldn't believe it. I mean, his favorite lunch was always tuna fish with mayonnaise on 7-grain toast. That's what he liked to eat right before the Olympia. He was so ripped up. Oh my God, tremendously. So, he was taking in less calories than he ate. He was in a negative calorie balance, and he was taking off weight. And he was training so hard that he was maintaining muscle. When you're at that stage, if you can maintain the muscle and burn fats, you're way ahead of the game. And one more point I want to make really clear for your listeners. about the Colorado experiment. And there's been a lot of people who weren't there who have an awful lot to say about it. But the truth of the matter is that Casey Viator went to the Colorado experiment at 160 some odd pounds, having almost lost a finger and his life to a reaction of a tetanus shot that he got in an extruding factory where he lost part of a finger. So he went to Colorado with Arthur Jones. And there's a lot of stories that Casey was taking drugs, or he went out after the workouts someplace in Colorado and did barbell training. Well, all that is nonsense. He was drug-free. He trained hard with Arthur Jones, and he gained a lot of muscle that he had previously had. So he wasn't building muscle. He was replacing muscle that he previously had. He worked hard to do it. He ate a lot of food but the food, he metabolized the food, and he was gaining muscle at a tremendous rate. I know this because I saw him subsequently, right after. In my job as an IFBB judge, you could always tell the drug look of somebody who was taking. He did not have vascularity. He was just big, round, and muscular. And he wasn't on drugs right after that experiment, nor on the experiment. So the people who talk about what they thought he did, or what somebody told them that he did, that he snuck out and worked out someplace else, it's all a bunch of, Arthur would say, hogwash. He trained hard, mostly on negative accentuated training, and he got big and strong and regained muscle that he had lost. All power to him. And he worked for it and he earned it.
Yeah, well, we know that you've spoken with our friend Mike Petrella, and you obviously know Mike well. You might know that he and some of his guys recently recreated the Colorado experiment workout for workout. And just based on their own experience, I mean, they said it was so intense, so incredibly challenging. I mean, they didn't even want to be in the gym. And, by the end of that 28 days, you know what I mean? Like, to imagine that someone would sneak out and do extra after doing, those incredibly challenging workouts. And everybody knows Arthur Jones was like really good at pulling the most out of someone, especially Casey. Yeah, it's ridiculous to imagine that he was going to try to do extra on top of that.
1980, when Mike trained at Mainline Health and Fitness before the Mr. Olympia contest, he would train at the same time in the afternoons, 3 days a week. And half the gym would come in just to watch the session. And usually I would go through with him. So I wasn't training Mike. We were kind of training together. So the Monday workout that we would have was great, just a great workout. It was always the exact protocol, the same exercises. I can tell you exactly the order, I remember it like it was yesterday. But he came back and trained Wednesday. I couldn't. I hadn't nearly recovered. By Friday, I trained again, and I still wasn't as strong as Monday's workout, whereas he seemed to thrive. He was staying at my apartment at the time, and if he was taking any drugs, they were oral. I mean, because there was no needles in my apartment. None, zero. There was no injectables at all. But the point I'm trying to make is because of the workout, because everybody who watched, even the women, were so enthralled and so passionate about the intensity and everything. Here was this kind of a great physique training at our club. People tried to go through that workout. And none of us recovered 3 days a week. So we cut it back to twice a week. And with me, in retrospect, I would have done better once a week. But nobody could do it 3 days a week.
Yeah.
All pre-exhaust, and the only rest we had was between body parts, which was never more than a minute or two. And you would take a look at Mike in the locker room afterwards with a whole bunch of guys around him. And it was incredible. This is a person who realized their potential, who just could recover from, whether it was the drugs, whether it was his genetics, whatever it was. He thrived on 3 day a week, whole body workouts. No split routines, no chest and triceps one day, back and biceps one day, legs the next. No consolidation routine that he espoused years afterwards when he was in a downward spiral. This was just consummate Nautilus, original Arthur Jones protocol with the double machines. No rest between the first and second exercise. And he thrived, as did Casey when I trained Casey, as did Ray. And today, if there's anybody in the country outside of us at X-Force and in the previous years, Mainline Health and Fitness, doing pre-exhaust as your basic protocol, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's funny. I trained Jesse that way for about a year. We only did pre-exhaust for at least a year. I
Is
think,
that really
right?
that long?
I think so.
don't
Yeah,
know.
and I think he was only doing maybe one workout a week.
Yeah.
He was doing some ninja training, the Ninja Warrior obstacle stuff.
How did you respond, Jesse?
Well, yeah, got real strong. I remember we would do this. The favorite combo to do was a trap bar deadlift with a leg extension in between, and then a squat right at the end. We, giant set, no rest in between those exercises. It was over in under 5 minutes. That was great.
Do that. I mean, once you go through something like that, it is awfully hard to. I mean, the first time you do it, you don't know, and you do it. Second time, you know what you're in for, and you're in trouble. Anybody said to me, he said, "F that stuff." He said, "I can't do it." He said, him and Gronkowski in Buffalo were training that way, pre-exhaust the way we did. He said, when you have those kind of genetics, do you really have to do that?
It is so incredibly efficient, and as you've mentioned in other interviews, it becomes safer in a lot of ways because you don't need as much weight, right? So there's not as much load on your joints and so forth to get the same sort of inroad. And again, because of if you have the correct equipment and the setup, one problem is we worked in the commercial gym. It wasn't our own facility. So obviously what happens is you have these amazing ideas. We're going to do pre-exhaust today, but then there's 100 people in your way and they're doing 5 sets. You know what I mean? So you're on the pec deck and you're about to go to the next, some guy jumps on and says, "Hey, I got 7 sets of incline." You know what I mean? Wait your turn. You can't do it.
If I make one point today to you that I think is relevant, that I want remembered, is that most of the high intensity, and they'll do a pushing movement and a pulling movement. They usually do full body workouts, but if they do, they're doing push-pull workouts. And do they respond? Darn right they respond, and they get awfully strong. There's a guy named Chris Donlin who runs a site, forget the name of it, but it's, abbreviated training. And he preaches, and he's very passionate about it, and I respect it. The reason we don't do it is because I personally always felt when I did push-pull compound movements, I would always feel the resulting soreness at the ends of the muscle. Like bench presses, I would always feel in my anterior delt right by the biceps insertion. I would never feel it from the sternum to the shoulder like I did when I was doing a set of arm crosses before a chest press. And if I just did overhead presses, I was feeling it mostly in my triceps. And if I just did rows, I wasn't feeling it nearly as much as if I did a set of pullover first. So not only is pre-exhaust, in my opinion, work more of a muscle, it does it safer because you're still doing the compound movement, but you're pre-exhausting it and you're alleviating the joint stress by working the full length of the muscle first. And I really think if safety is your first thing, you're getting the best of both worlds by prefacing your compound movement by a single joint movement. Bang, bang. And that's the way Arthur felt. But Arthur did say to me later in his life that he thought that pre-exhaust training might have been too much overtraining. But I recollect that what he must have meant was how many days a week you're doing that pre-exhaust. I think he was doing it too much. And people were not recovering from the 3 workouts a week. But if he had cut it back to 3 times every 2 weeks, or even once a week, although that was a lot of time between sessions back in the Nautilus days when they were recommending 48 to 72 hours, I think that he would never have thought that that was overtraining. It was a medically sound way then, and I think it's a medically sound way now. And I think if people try it and give it a real good shot, the intensity is just where you want it to be, and you can do it safely, and you won't get hurt.
You're getting me all fired up to do some pre-exhaust.
Let's go live.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. You get off of a pullover followed by a pull down or a row, and the feeling of your lats, it's indigenous to that. And a chest press, if you do an arm cross first and you're really working the contracted position and bang onto a chest press, when you finish it, you're going to feel right in the belly of the muscle. And to me, even though maybe the muscles don't have the nervation, gets sore, something gets sore. And if it's getting sore right in the belly of the muscle, like curls, if you work that contracted position in a curl, you're going to feel it right in the belly of that muscle. And I think that is a result of working more of the muscle. I really think you have to work the contracted position. You might not have to have an aggressive cam that works you so hard that you're always failing at that point. And there is going to be a fall off because of the levers of the arm in different positions, but you still need resistance in the contracted position of single joint movements.
Yeah.
After all these years.
I always wish that's another thing that strikes me as interesting, that no one literally has ever tried to recreate those double machines, right? They were amazing. Why isn't someone doing it now, like making a newer, better version of, the double chest, the double shoulder, the leg press, leg extension, or my favorite, that all-in-one pullover with the pull down built right in.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they're nowhere unless you can collect them and find the originals. Nobody's ever tried to do it again.
I don't even think the HIIT community is into that. Again, at least from my travels, I find that mostly the workout looks something like a leg press to a overhead press to a row to a chest press to I think it's just they push and they pull and they push and they pull. And I think they're satisfied and I think that they're making results. But I'm not sure it's the most medically sound way to train. So is there really an interest in building big double machines? I don't know. If anybody gets involved, it'll probably be the young people who I'm looking at right now. The micro.
We got to go partner up with Tyler Hobson, see if we can get him to do it.
Yeah, he's an awfully smart guy. He's made us two machines, a bicep and a tricep machine. And this guy, well, he's a smart guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy too.
He is a passionate man. He wants to do things right.
Yeah, I agreed. He is a really, really wonderful, wonderful person. I'm so many things are spinning in my head, but I mean, now I think I'm going to go build myself the world's greatest pre-exhaust workout pretty soon.
Look, it's my legacy. I will stand with it. Not everybody's going to do it. They certainly haven't. But if you can train up to 77, my age, basically, except for old injuries by my misuse of a tool, a barbell, and you can still look strong and be strong, injury-free, I think that says a lot. I think longevity means something because if you're on the shelf, what good is your program?
Yeah.
It's safety first.
Agreed 100%. I have a question now. We know that high intensity training, and you mentioned it earlier, but we know that when done correctly, it's obviously having this global effect, metabolically, heart and lungs, they're all involved. So, there's no necessarily like sort of cardio required. That being said, I know that Clarence Bass, he likes to do conditioning work also. And he's come to a place sort of similar to you now in his most current talks where he does one strength training workout a week, and then he'll rest 3 or 4 days, and then he'll do one high intensity sort of interval training, kind of conditioning, and then rest again. And he basically just does one of each a week. And in his own writing and talking lately, he said he wished he started doing that in his 30s or 40s, because he's about 80 these days. So again, you said you were doing once a week and it's been super effective. I find that is not an unusual thing, but did you ever consider doing, say, your nice X-Force workout on a Monday and then maybe a different sort of conditioning workout? Do you like that sort of stuff? Would you ever experiment with that, or do you feel like you get enough just from the single X-Force workout?
No. No, I haven't considered it, only because I think by nature I'm lazy and I have no desire to sit on a bike and do it. However, which I think is important, should I do it? Probably. But upon getting up in the morning, my resting heart rate's in the mid-50s. I don't believe in super health. I think that the lower your heart rate is, probably the less work your heart has to do. And it's a good thing to have a lower resting heart rate, which I do. My lipid levels, my cholesterol is under 200. My LDLs are under 70 and my HDLs are high. So my glucose levels are good. My creatinine levels are good. These are things that you don't hear people talking about, but these are things that should be talked about. Because if you're talking about, I know my pal Fred Hahn loves meat. It's a high protein diet. And look at his physique. He looks great. I respect him. I don't know what his lipid numbers are, but his lipid panel is good. Then he should do exactly what he's doing because he's obviously getting physiological muscular results. But if if you talk to somebody and they, well, I don't get my blood, I don't know what my cholesterol is, and they finally get it and their cholesterol is 350 and their LDLs are 125 or 150, 175. And he's like, I don't believe in that science. Okay, well, I'm not judging you. I'm in a non-judgmental zone. But for your own health, I think you should know what those things are. And if all medicine is telling you that you should be looking at your lipid panel and your glucose levels, and you should not have high pre-diabetic sugar levels, you should know these things as an intelligent bodybuilder. And we're all bodybuilders because we all trying to increase our, we're all bodybuilders. We might not be at the same levels, but we're all bodybuilders. You should care about your health. It doesn't mean that I won't drop dead tomorrow, but at least I know what my levels are and I try to eat what works for me. What works for me is a balanced diet. I like oatmeal for breakfast and I'll put nuts in it. And I like eggs. So I'll eat eggs on toast for lunch and I'll have fish or chicken or even lean meat and a vegetable for dinner. And they're my staples. I'm 165, 170 pounds. I'm strong. I'm still almost as strong in my 70s as I was in my 40s and 50s. So at least it works for me.
Sounds pretty damn good to me.
So I'm not forcing myself with 2 grams of protein to every pound of body weight. With Ellington and my all very, very high carbohydrate diet. For me, what works is someplace in the middle, just common sense that's sort of like everything in moderation.
I may have a solution for you for your laziness for the conditioning. Have you ever heard of these things called the Carol bike?
No, I don't think so.
It's basically a computer controlled. They say AI, right? But it's an exercise bike. But it has built-in high intensity interval training programs that are controlled by this computer interface, and the whole workout takes 8 minutes and 40 seconds. It's just 2 all out, and it's based on the research out of McMaster's University up in Canada. It's 2 full out sprints, 20 seconds each, like as hard as you possibly can sprint for 20 seconds, but you get a long recovery between, like 3 or 4 minutes. And you just do that twice. It has all these amazing benefits and it takes less than 10 minutes. So that's something you might do, like Monday you do X-Force and Friday you do a Carol bike workout and you got all your bases covered.
Well, there was a piece of equipment that Stairmaster put out years ago. It was a standing piece of equipment that you pushed your legs down alternate fashion and you lifted a weight up.
Yeah.
Call it the
cross aerobics.
It's called cross aerobics.
Yeah.
That to me was the best piece of equipment that if I had it today, I would use it because it's really strength training. You were lifting a weight, but it was repetitive. Also, if you wanted, if you had a duo squat machine or a duo leg press, which had an akinetic or infimetric modality on it, you could be pushing one leg against the other.
Right. Yeah, I remember those. Amazing.
Those things were so tough to do. But again, it's something I don't do. It's something I should be doing.
All right, I just put it out there. Just put it out there.
It's a good put out. Yeah. Maybe next time I talk to you, I'll be doing
less than 10 minutes a week.
Yeah, Roger, I don't know if there's anyone we've had on our podcast as a guest who has more experience, in the fitness industry than you do. It really is incredible. And I think one thing we like to ask, our guests is, for people just entering the industry, whether they're trainers, maybe they're clients looking for a trainer, like what advice, like with all of your 50 years of experience, what's the best advice you can give those people who are just coming in now?
I think that's a great question. And I think my answer would be 1, passion, and 2, make sure that you're walking the walk. If you own a gym or wanted to own a gym or was part of an ownership, you want to hire somebody who is passionately involved with the exact way of training that your philosophy is. Thus, if you run a high intensity gym and you hire a cyclist whose passion is cycling, you're never going to probably have that cyclist fully integrated into your program because their mind probably is more on the cycling. That doesn't mean if they're a cyclist and they do high intensity training and they really see that they really just love cycling, but they know high intensity training is really going to be a great stimulus for their cycling, then you have a good employee. But you can't have an employee who works for you who goes to a barbell gym afterwards and trains 6 days a week. You understand? So you've got to believe in what you're doing, and you have to feel empowered by what you're doing. And you've got to walk the walk that when your clients come in, they believe you, whether you're a trainer or an owner, that they believe what they're going to do is something that they can believe in, that you believe in. There can't be any contradictions to that. You've got to be able to believe in what you're doing and feel empowered by doing it. I've hired a lot of people in my life, and the best employees I've ever had are always the ones who are always asking questions, always reading about it, and always trying to improve their workouts and understand the physiology behind it. You know, I guess it's off the track a little bit, Jesse, but people are always looking for variety in training. I never really bought into that so much. You know, if you're on a steady workout, you can tell if you're improving, but are you improving in that workout? And I believe it doesn't take very much for the body to create its own variety by increasing your reps or increasing your weights. It's not necessarily by changing your program because you feel like you have to change the program. Mike Mentzer always did the exact same workout when we trained. John Grimmick used to tell me he almost did the exact same workout. Steve Reeves seemed to do the exact same workouts. Don't change just for the fact of changing. Try to improve on the workout you're doing. If you're doing curls with 100 pounds, barbell curls, and you can eventually do 150 in strict form, you can be sure your arms are going to be bigger. You don't necessarily have to switch to incline curls or concentration curls unless you're not getting the results that you want to be getting. Be passionate, believe in your workout, feel empowered by your workout, and really objectively look at your workout. Am I getting the results that I think I should be getting? Do I really believe that I can be doing it? And if you put all those things together, you're going to make improvements. And then only compare yourself to yourself and never to anybody else. Always try to be a better you and never the other guy. You're never going to be him. And you're never going to have his different genetics than yours, or his arm lengths or his muscle belly lengths. It's always you against yourself, and the passion behind it and believing of what you're doing, whatever your workout is. I hope that is a rambling answer to what you need.
I hope we get to meet you in person at REC one of these days. Are you thinking about going in May?
No, I'm getting talked into it by my staff, and so
yes.
we'll try. And Luke bothered me yesterday about it, so I think.
All right. Yeah. Well, we are going to. Our whole team is going to be there. There's only 3 of us.
Well, I think your questions are really good today, and I hope your people who watch this and listen glean some information from it.
Yeah, I feel like a little guilty and selfish because I just want to have fun chatting with you about all this stuff. I'm not really worrying about what they're listening to. I'm just having fun talking.
Well, now that we've done it once, if you ever have any questions, I'm always available. You can always contact me anytime.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that, Roger. It's been awesome talking with you. Thank you for sharing all your experience and advice. And I definitely think people are going to enjoy listening to this.
Just go forward and be yourself and be honest and believe in what you're doing and listen to other people, but don't back down.
Thank you for
Appreciate
all of
that.
Yeah, it was definitely an honor and a privilege for us today.
It was fun today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, over and out.
Yeah, talk to you soon, Roger. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Boom, baby! What's up, people? Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Truth Not Trends.
That's right here at TNT Strength Headquarters, Truth Not Trends.
Please, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And don't forget to share with a friend.
You can find us on the web at tntstrength.com.
That's right, TNT Strength now coming to you in person at 5255 College Avenue in Oakland, California. You can call the studio 510-768-5421. You can also text us at 855-796-9905.
Or shoot us an email at contact@tntstrength.com. And whatever you do, stay off of that stupid blue bubbly bosun.
From the brain helmets of Andrei Yakovenko of New Element Training in Toronto and Philip Shepard, the creator of the Embodied Present Process,
Deep Fitness, the book.
Learn what you need to about mindful strength training to failure.
Push, push, push!
Be here now. Concentrate.
You got another rep in there!
Breathe. Connect. Feel your body in motion.
You got it! You're failing and you're succeeding!
That's right. This book is approved by none other than Wayne Westcott, James Fisher, some of the top researchers. It's also TNT approved, baby.
That's right. The foreword was written by Dr. Doug McGuff, who you all know as the co-author of Body by Science. This book is standing on the shoulders of giants. So you really need to go check it out right now. It's available for purchase on Amazon.
Go get it right now. Amazon, it's waiting. Deep Fitness.
Mixed and edited by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It, LLC. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.
Always something there to remind me.